Hey guys, it's Chat-Danganronpa again here with yet another new video for you guys. And today I'm kicking off a new series which I'm entitling Dan Chat. And Dan Chat is basically going to be a video series to talk about and review and give impressions on more modern release games. So more current release games I just really want to get back to talking about and giving impressions, kind of reviewing games, some more modern release games. Because you guys know I pick up a lot of these games and hence I do unboxings and stuff like that, so you know I'm getting these games and I play them and stuff like that, but it's just you guys sometimes don't get to hear my thoughts on it, especially if you don't follow the podcast. You guys kind of miss out on getting some of my thoughts, impressions, and reviews on some of these more current release games. So what do you say we jump into it right away? So I want to kick off Dan Chat with a game that's been on my mind ever since I beat it a couple of days ago. I've been really wanting to talk about this game, and this is why I'm establishing this series. Is because so many times I beat some of these games or just play a lot of these games, more modern stuff, and it's like, man, I really need to talk about it. So now I'm gonna start talking about these games, but I want to kick it off. I just finished this game a couple of days ago. Honestly, one of the best mystery adventure games I've played in quite some time, and honestly one of my big sleeper hits of this year, and that is Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc. Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc is a game published by NIS America and developed by Spike Chunsoft for the PS Vita. Spike Chunsoft might actually sound familiar because they're really well known for making some really quality mystery adventure games. They are actually the same developers of games like 999 and Virtue's Last Reward or the Zero Escape series, and they've started doing Danganronpa recently. The story of Danganronpa, Trigger Happy Havoc, follows a boy named Makoto, and he's basically been, I guess you could say, handpicked or hand-selected to attend this really prestigious academy or high school called Hope's Peak Academy. And the catch to Hope's Peak Academy is that they only handpick or hand-select kind of the ultimate students, as they call them. Like everyone's kind of the quote-unquote ultimate at something. So, for example, someone's the ultimate computer programmer, someone's the ultimate novelist, someone's the ultimate baseball star, ultimate swimmer. Like everyone has their own unique ultimate ability, something that they're just really incredibly talented at or really incredibly good at. And you're just kind of an average student who gets picked, so you're kind of the quote unquote ultimate lucky student because you were selected at random to attend this academy. And there's about 15 characters to start off with, and you kind of show up there and you meet everyone, but you just realize that something's a bit off about this place, and then kind of all hell breaks loose when you kind of pass out and you wake up not knowing much, and you wake up in this kind of trapped confinement, which is the Host Peak Academy schools, and you realize something really dark and twisted is going on because all the windows have been boarded up, you can't get out, and then that's when they introduce some of the interesting facets to the game. So this is around the time when they introduce one of the most important characters in the game, and that is, of course, the infamous Monokuma. And Monokuma is this kind of black and white bear, teddy bear kind of creature thing, and he starts to tell you and kind of divulge this kind of story of what's going on, and you start to realize that it's all been laid out to be this elaborate kind of killing game, and you're trapped in this academy, and he establishes certain guidelines, regulations, and rules to follow. And one of the big things is that the only way to escape the school is by graduating, as they call it. And to graduate, and this is where the biggest mechanic of the game comes into play, to graduate involves successfully murdering one person or two, no more than two, because that becomes a rule. Successfully murdering someone and getting away with it. And that's the big part. The last part's really key, is getting away with it, because not only is it enough to murder someone, you have to get away with it. This involves kind of divulging into the gameplay mechanics of the game. The gameplay is broken down into a couple kind of segments, and one of the main segments being this kind of free time. You do get free time. The game kind of follows like a kind of standard day and night path, and days pass by. And there's certain times where nothing's really happening. You'll have free time, as they call it, and you can have this opportunity to kind of talk and engage with other people, other characters, and kind of get to know them really well, get their kind of story. You can give them presents and whatnot, and kind of explore the school, because the school, as the game progresses, kind of slowly unfolds for you. Certain areas are kind of locked off, and as it kind of progresses, more and more of the school opens up, and you're starting to, because there's also a mystery kind of going around with not only this mysterious killing game, but a mystery with who's doing this, who the mastermind is, who's orchestrating this, what's going on. Like the school's kind of mysterious in itself too, because it has some mysteries attached to it. So, and there is actual gameplay, so it involves like moving around in first person view around the school and kind of looking at stuff and talking to certain people. Then it kind of divulges, once a murder actually happens, it'll divulge into what they call an investigation time period. And an investigation time period takes place from the confirmation of a murder, which, in order for a murder to be confirmed, 3 people have to witness the kind of dead body or dead bodies. They have to be witness to that, and that's when the kind of investigation time period begins. And that'll lead up for like a certain amount of time until the class trial, which the class trial is like this big investigation where everyone puts forth all their evidence and stuff like that to try and figure out who the actual murderer is. And that's really key. So to kind of move over and talk about the class trials are some of the biggest aspects of this game, which feature a lot of the gameplay and where a lot of the meat of the game is. The class trials take an extensive amount of time. Honestly, some of the class trials will range up for upwards of like 1 to 2 hours to kind of go through the whole process. But the class trials are critical because, to go back to the story element, that in order for someone to graduate or successfully leave the school, they have to successfully murder someone without anyone finding out about it, which is why there's a class trial, because there is where everyone tries to kind of figure out who the actual murderer is. And the reason for that is, it's super elaborate, but if the person can get away with murder and someone convicts the wrong person, then that one person actually gets to successfully graduate and escape. The other catch is, if you guess wrong, everyone else is executed or murdered. So it's kind of your life or their life, kind of this dichotomy there, which is super interesting. So it kind of adds an agency in order to be able to figure out who the actual murderer is, because your life depends on it and depends on guessing the right murderer. And if they do guess the right murderer, then obviously you kind of assume that the person who is successfully convicted of the murder also gets elaborately executed in these ridiculously gruesome and really violent ways by Monokuma. And Monokuma is just a super interesting character to begin with anyways. He's just one of the most psychopathic, twisted, nicest character. Like, he's just a mix of a bag of emotions. He's happy sometimes, he's sad sometimes, he's angry. He's really witty and funny, and he's really dark and depressing. It's like he's a mix of everything. But to kind of go back to the class trials, it kind of works almost like Phoenix Wright or something like that. Like, it reminds me of like Phoenix Wright games and stuff like that. But it kind of involves where people make their arguments, and you kind of have to use like a trigger to kind of gauge certain, like, fallacies in what they're saying, and you have to kind of hit certain fallacies with the correct corresponding information to kind of contradict what they're saying and to ultimately get to ultimate truth there. And there's also some other elements where there's like a music rhythm game kind of section where you have to like knock back people's kind of arguments in a music rhythm kind of fashion to the beat of the music. There's also like a hangman segment where you kind of have to guess the correct words based off certain letters and stuff like that. And then at the end of each class trial, for the most part, every class trial ends with kind of a closing statement. And this closing statement is done in a kind of visual novel way, so it's kind of laid out like a comic book. And it'll show like the comic book acts of like all the murders and how it took place. And it'll have like these images that correspond to like certain moments where certain things happen. And it's your job in the closing trials to kind of lay out this kind of novel of how the murder was actually executed, and you got to lay out all the corresponding information, which is a really challenging part. And that's really interesting though, and it's just a really interesting game. Now I'd like to talk a little bit more about like the actual Host Peak Academy. So since this is a main area of where the game takes place for a majority of the time, you'll be spending a lot of time there, and hopefully, and the good thing is that Host Peak Academy is a really interesting place to explore. It's full of color, it's full of different areas that are, it's got like a bathhouse, it's got a swimming pool, library, like there's so many various areas to explore, hence that kind of mystery adventure exploration kind of element. And it's exciting to find new things and find new clues and whatnot. And it's just a really interesting place to be in. And a lot of the characters in the game are actually really, really likable. A lot of them are super interesting. All the characters are like drastically different from one another. Everyone's so unique despite how many people are actually there. And it's just incredible to see the kind of interchange of dialogue. And that's what I'll say just in general about the game. The dialogue, I mean, a mystery adventure hinges so much on that. The dialogue. The dialogue has to be really good and interesting to gauge a kind of player's interest throughout the whole game. And the good thing about Danganronpa, incredible craftsmanship with the kind of story narrative and the dialogue. It is so engaging. Like as an overall story, it's got so many plot twists, so many unexpected twists and turns, loopholes, contradictions, betrayal. Like there's so much to the actual story. You will never, I promise you, you will never know how something is going to unfold. Like even with the murders and stuff like that, if you think you have one of the murders kind of pinned down, like, oh, it has to be this person, there'll be something to kind of flip that or be like, oh, wait, no, it's got to be this guy or this gal. And it's super interesting. It gets so involved later on towards the end to kind of just really evolve, and it kind of tells, it starts to divulge into the Hope's Peak Academy mystery, the mystery behind who's the organized killer of this killing game. You know, it starts to get more involved later on. It's just much more engaging. But even in the lighthearted moments of like the kind of interchange between days of free time and stuff like that, the talking between characters, it's just so good. You know, like it's so witty. Like it's actually really funny games at times. Like tons of hilarious dialogue, tons of serious dialogue, really well crafted, and the characters are super likable. And it is partly voice acted, so there is a lot of voice acting in the game. Not everything is voice acted, but a majority of it has actual voice acting corresponding to all the characters. And for the most part, everyone actually does a really incredible job with the voice acting. It seems like everyone really got into their characters, and the voice acting is just super passionate. So, and I definitely have to make mention and talk about the presentation of this game and the art style, because it's very unique, and it uses a kind of unique kind of style. So like everything's actually kind of like hyper stylized, and it's using this really unique feature which they call 2.5D hand drawn animation. So the game is kind of in 3D, but like the environments are still look hand drawn, and it's still kind of like 2D, if that makes any sense. Like it looks 2D, but the environments are actually 3D. So just kind of give you a picture of how the game visually looks. Super saturated colors, and it's just really interesting, that kind of 2.5D aspect to the game. And the music, for the most part, in Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc is fairly solid. I mean, the music usually correlates really well with the tempo and the mood of what's actually going on in the game. So, for instance, if it's the morning and it's like free time and nothing really bad's happening, you're just kind of hanging out with friends, talking to people, then it's got like this really catchy, like kind of lighthearted, upbeat music. And then once like a murder happens, it gets super dramatic, or like the investigation sequence, it's like really up tempo and stuff like that. So the music variety is really great and really well timed and really well fitting to what's actually happening in the game. So overall, I was just absolutely baffled by how incredible of a mystery adventure game this was, and it's actually a quite lengthy game. It actually took me, I didn't realize how long I was playing it until I saw my save file, but it took me roughly 25 hours to actually play through the whole story, because it's kind of broken up into chapters, and each chapter can range anywhere between like 5 to 6 hours or something. It depends. It actually gets longer and longer as you go along, and obviously the class trials and the investigations get much more intense and much more involved as you go along. But overall, it's just a really engrossing mystery adventure game with a really unique twist. Psychotic bear, killing game, high school students, it's just so witty, so huge range of emotions. It's just really incredibly crafted. It's just one of the most well-crafted mystery adventure games I've played in quite some time, probably since 999. And it's fitting because it's from the same developer as 999, which they actually do drop a 999 reference in Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc, which I thought was really funny. But and there's so much going on in this game. It's just a really avant-garde game, really experimentalist as a mystery adventure game. And there's so many elements that are just thrown in there, and it's just constantly keeping it charged and refreshing. And overall, the story just it starts off so kind of obtuse in the beginning, but evolves to something that is just absolutely engaging and will have you absolutely hooked towards the game's climax, which I could not put the game down when the game started to get towards the climax. Incredible game. There's also a new game plus mode, which they call Dangan Academy, which is the same thing but without It's kind of the same thing, but without all the killing, so you kind of get to experience and talk to people, and it's kind of like a simulation game in a way. So there's a lot of content here. It's a really, really lengthy mystery adventure game. You'll definitely get your money's worth. But if you're a mystery adventure fan, I cannot stress this enough. This is probably one of the best mystery adventure games I've played in quite some time. One of my favorites. I cannot wait for the sequel. And that is, of course, Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc for the PS Vita, published by NIS America and developed by Spike Chunsoft. One of my sleeper hits of the year and an absolute gem for the PS Vita. So could not recommend it more. So that'll conclude this episode of Dan Chat. I'd like to thank you guys for watching as always. Until next time, I will see you guys later. Bye, guys.